maybe should prosecute Dr. Fauci. $250 million for transgender animal studies? Are you fuck? You are living in the most dangerous time in American history.
We won't take a single back step.
Former professional basketball player is now the Republican Party's choice.
Can you imagine Royce White, the U.S. Senator?
White won the endorsement on May 18th with 67% of the vote.
There's nothing that guarantees we win. But I guarantee you if we lose, we will die. Welcome back to Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody, you might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this is episode 246, I believe. Today is Wednesday, the 12th, February 12th, year of our Lord, 2025. We got another reaction video queued up for you today. A bunch of political things to talk about, some stuff that happened from the USAID scandal, and it is a really significant scandal. It can't really be understated. And there are bigger scandals, don't get me wrong, and we'll talk about some of that as well as we go along here. But strap in. This Friday, we have the great Stephen K. Bannon. Next Monday, we're going to have another Family and Friends guest episode, the great Chris Martenson. So we have two guys who I couldn't respect more and admire more for their ability to see what's going on in the world, and even more importantly, to articulate it and make sense of it. So, and to distill it down to something that's digestible. Two truth tellers, Stephen K. Bannon for Friday's episode as of right now, and Chris Martenson, the great Chris Martenson, for Monday. So let's get rolling. We're not wasting any time today. We're going to get rolling here. Give me the first clip. First clip, we got Tina Smith, and she was cross-examining Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who will have the decision, I believe, on his confirmation tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, as of a week and a half ago. And this is what I wanted to show. I don't remember if we showed it or not, but even if we did, it's important to show it again, and I'll do that from time to time. I'll run a clip 3, 4, 5, especially if it's important. We'll run it as many times as we need to get the point across. But this was her shilling for Big Pharma and, the medical industrial complex. Let's roll the clip here.
It's all over the country. And prosecutors.
Mr. Chairman, you told me I'm out of time, and the witness continues to filibuster even after I said I'm done.
Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member, and welcome, Mr. Kennedy. So, Mr. Kennedy, I don't have a question for you on abortion. I think that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle have covered this, but I want to say I can respect people who have different views than mine on this issue, but it's hard for me to respect people who won't give a straight answer to what they think on this issue in particular. Mr. Chair, I just want to note that I understand that anti-choice advocates have said that in these hearings they were looking to hear Mr. Kennedy provide some reassurance that he is on their side, and I'm not hearing that. And I think most Americans are looking for some hint that the decisions that people make about abortion should be personal and private, and they should be free to make those decisions without government interference, and I'm not hearing that either. To make it worse, the answers that you have given tell me that the Trump administration is more than willing to restrict or even ban medication abortion without a single act of Congress, and even in states where abortion is legal. And what is clear to me is that you and President Trump are dangerous to women's access to mifepristone. So having said that, I want to move to a different topic. Mr. Kennedy, I appreciate Senator Cornyn's questions about mental and behavioral health, something that I care a lot about. I know that you and your family have had personal experience with mental health challenges, as have I. And I agree that the mental health crisis in this country is a crisis. So let me ask you, in an interview in 2023 and again in 2024, you blamed school shootings on antidepressants. You said, and this is a quote, "There is no time in American history or human history that kids were going to shoot schools and shooting their classmates. It really started happening coterminous with the introduction of these drugs, with Prozac and with other drugs." So do you believe, as you've said, that antidepressants cause school shootings? This should be a simple question.
I don't think anybody can answer that question, and I didn't answer that question. I said it should be studied. I said it should be studied along with other potential
You pause it. As soon as when, you know, and maybe I'm a little fucked up in the head, right? But as soon as these elected officials go to ask, nominees or whoever questions, and upon the first response, they start to cut them off. I mean, shouldn't that be a sign for all of the voters, the constituents, for Tina Smith individually, but as a party, because there is a similar sort of tone across the Democrat Party, and one that you can see across some of the Republican Party as well. I'm no fan of the Uniparty, but I mean, just immediately here, she cuts him off before he can even respond. I mean, you ask me a question, I start to answer the question, you don't like my answer, or you don't like what you think my answer is going to be, and you immediately start to cut me off. This is so disingenuous, from the outset, and it's just, it's become the MO of middle-aged, liberal, and far left progressive white women. I mean, this is how they talk to people.
They want yes or no answers to questions that are not yes or no questions.
It's not a yes or no answer. And actually, if we want to be technical, I think he could have gotten away with saying yes. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Go ahead.
So they may cause
social media. But I don't know. I would never because there's no science on that.
Well,
Senator.
there is, Senator. There is, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you for the promotion.
The science shows that there is no link between school shootings and antidepressants. And in fact, most school shooters were not even treated with antidepressants. And of those that were, there was no evidence of association.
I don't think you can say that, Senator, because HIPAA rules, nobody knows.
Well, that is, Mr. Kennedy, do you think that people who take antidepressants are dangerous?
I think, listen, I'm not going into HHS if I'm privileged to be confirmed with any.
So you can't say that people
to impose any preconceived ideas that I may have. I just want to have good science.
So you're not saying that they aren't dangerous, which means that they could be dangerous. Let me ask you this.
That's not true.
You've described Americans who take mental health medications as addicts who need to be sent to wellness farms to recover. Is that what you believe?
No, of course I didn't say that anybody should be compelled to do anything.
No, but you said they should be sent.
I said they should be available to them. I didn't say they should be sent.
You said that folks that take antidepressants are like addicts. That I can provide that,
Mr. I think
Chair.
They should have the availability. Listen, I know people, including members of my family, who've had a much worse time getting off of SSRIs than people have getting off of heroin. It's the withdrawal period is, and it's written on the label.
I have some experience with this myself, Mr. Kennedy. This is personal for me. When I was a young woman and I was struggling with depression, thankfully, I had the resources to help me get through it, including a new generation of SSRI uptake inhibitors, which helped to clear my mind, get me back on track to being a mom and a wife and a productive, happy person. And I'm really grateful for that therapy. So I have some experience with this, and I think that everyone should have access to that care. And your job as secretary is to expand access to care, not to spread lies and misinformation. And, the things that you say, Mr. Kennedy, they live on. They have impact. And, we're having this conversation at the same moment that my Republican colleagues are looking to try to figure out how to save money any way they can, and so they want to cut Medicaid. Let's just think about this for a minute, because you're going to be, should you be confirmed, you would be responsible for CMS, which provides mental and behavioral health care to millions of Americans. Close to 40% of folks on Medicaid have a behavioral health condition, and you would be part of this administration that would be looking to cut Medicaid. So, Mr. Kennedy, these statements that you've made linking antidepressants to school shootings, they reinforce the stigma that people who experience mental health every day face every single day. And I'm very concerned that this is another example of your record of sharing false and misleading information that actually really hurts people.
Senator, you're
Thank you,
mischaracterizing my statements.
I am only putting into the record what you have said, Mr. Kennedy.
You're mischaracterizing my statements, and I'm happy that you had a good experience on SSRIs. Many Americans have very good experience on it. Others have not.
That would be an issue between them and their physicians, and not for the future head of HHS to be putting out misinformation about the dangers of SSRIs and other antidepressant medication, spreading the stigma and the fear that we're actually trying to overcome.
Do you think physicians, when they make that prescription, ought to have access to good science?
Of course they do. And
That's all I believe, too. And you and I are in agreement, Senator.
And to your point that you made when you made these statements, it was not based on good science. I don't know what it was based on.
I was saying the science needed to be done. I was saying these are potential culprits. We're coterminous, and I named other things. I said video games. I said social media. I said SSRIs. SSRIs have a black box warning of suicidal, homicidal behavior.
Mr. Chair, I will submit to the chair the information that I have about what Mr. Kennedy has said of linking antidepressants to school shootings. Thank you.
What a bitch.
Yeah. I mean, it should disgust every single person that watches it, regardless of your party affiliation. I don't think that this is a partisan. First of all, I don't think it should be a partisan issue, but I also don't think it should be a partisan opinion on how she interacted with him. You know, is whether Republican, Democrat, Independent, you vote every time, you don't vote at all. I mean, some things are just more common courtesy and basic humanity shit than they are political. I think we got to get back to that. I think that's part of the problem is everything's so politically charged. It's hard for people to even talk to each other with any decency. But especially about this issue. I mean, there are some issues that are going to get hot and contentious, and I'm all for it. Obviously, the show is one where I talk, you know, I go hard. There's no doubt about it, and I like people who go hard. But at the end of the day, I thought he could have gotten away with saying yes. I mean, you can't. Here's the deal. Technically speaking, it's more than plausible that if a school shooter is on SSRIs, that in some way, shape, or form, that medication played a role in the events that take place on those days or when that happens. Now, how big of a role? Obviously, that's something that's deeply scientific to a level where we may never have a definitive answer. You know, how much did Prozac play a role in this school shooting with this particular kid on this day? I mean, now you're asking for a level of science that Tina Smith, I don't think, asks for on many other occasions, right? I mean, and that's kind of the scam here is she's asking for him to make a statement. And this is the double speak that Democrats do. This is the double speak that establishment shills do. They ask you for a level of evidence that they themselves don't require when it suits their own agenda. Right? Where was the level of evidence on N95 masks? Where's the level of evidence? Where's the double-blind placebos on the vaccine? Where's the double-blind placebos on some of these SSRI and anti-anxiety medications, the antidepressants? You know, where's the double-blind placebos from the child vaccine schedule that we have, you know, outside of COVID? You know, none of this stuff meets the scientific, the scientific standard that they want to try and force Robert F. Kennedy to comment from. So, what evidence is there that the SSRIs played a role? Well, was the person on them or not? Do they have some cognitive effect or not? Some neurological effect or not? The answer is definitively yes. We know that if you take Prozac, it has some effect on you. And we also know that the effect is oftentimes so unpredictable that getting the proper treatment for anxiety and depression often requires a time period of trial and error to get the dosage right. And the black box label on SSRIs and antidepressants has been there for decades, and Tina Smith knows that. So the line of questioning is theatrical in and of itself. It's for her base, it's for voters, it's for the Democrat Party, it's for the cameras that she knows are on, and it's for an anti-Trump movement. That's what it's for. Anybody who's honest and worth their salt knows that SSRIs are dangerous. And then she says, well, I took them myself and I needed them. And well, it's not so clear to me that they helped her, to be honest, with how she's talking to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, in fact, Tina, Amy, and a bunch of other women who may or may not be on SSRIs, I'm not sure, but you're no shining beacon of the efficacy of antidepressant drugs. If anything, you're a knock against them. And there are probably a lot of people out there who have successfully found some type of schedule or treatment plan that involves SSRIs that worked for them. So I'm not saying that we should do away with antidepressants in general. I do think there are more natural ways, better natural ways. Like I said before, I was on Prozac when I first was diagnosed with anxiety, and I think it did help. I did feel a difference. I never had suicidal or homicidal thoughts, but people do report having that. And, did they help? Perceivably, they helped. Could I have done without them? I think so. Looking back, there were more natural ways to achieve the same result. It's just like I was saying a couple weeks back on the podcast. I was looking into it because I was getting some high blood pressure readings, and I was just looking into natural ways. Well, first what happened was I got a high blood pressure reading, and I just decided to take 30 minutes and do some deep breathing, which I've learned through athletics and sports and yoga and meditation and all. So I know how to do, and I've really learned it from having anxiety because one of the things they do when you have a panic attack is you got the paper bag trick where anxiety or panic attacks make you feel like you're short of breath, make you feel like your breathing is constricted. And oftentimes your mind will tell you, I'm not getting enough air. I can't breathe. So they give you a brown paper bag, and if you can inflate the bag, it physically shows you that oxygen is, or carbon dioxide is, going into the bag as you exhale. So I've learned these breathing techniques, and I was actually able to bring my blood pressure numbers down just from breathing. So I started to think, I was like, man, cardiovascular disease, blood pressure, high blood pressure, diabetes, these things are common, very common chronic diseases in this country. I just wanted to look into what doctors or what scientists were saying on what does yoga and meditation do for high blood pressure. And sure enough, it says that even 5 to 10 minutes of focused breathing can help lower high blood pressure. Now, what does that say? It says that a lot of Americans would do well, and a lot of cardiovascular disease and a lot of high blood pressure and other chronic diseases related to it could be cured even potentially by simply taking out a little bit of time in your day to do some focused breathing. The problem is that a lot of us don't know how beneficial it is. We don't know how to do it, or we don't have the time. Right? Some people actually don't have the time physically. Some people just don't make the time because of priority. And so when I see an RFK, what I think in my gut is that RFK is somebody who's going to try and introduce the common American citizen to this information, hopefully through our school system where health ed has become more hypersexual in anything than it is a mechanism of well-being for the average person, right? I mean, they'll tell you how the body works and, it's anatomy class, right? But they don't tell you, hey, if you breathe 20 minutes, you'll focus breathing 20 minutes a day, you're going to reduce your risk of lifetime cardiovascular disease by this percent. Or, for example, they say there's a study that alleges if you fast, if you do a water fast for 7 days, one time in your life, you decrease your risk of cancer by 70%.
Really?
Did you ever learn that in health class?
No.
Exactly.
That's the first time I've
You
heard
know,
that.
so these are the things that we can look forward to with RFK, in my opinion. What Tina's doing is you're just creating a roundabout, circular sort of gotcha line of questioning because she's in on the scam, and the scam is we're gonna justify a fat, bloated federal budget, which we, being Tina Smith herself, can siphon money off from while claiming it's for the health and well-being of the American people. And when people like Donald Trump and RFK want to take a real accounting and audit what the funding is doing and what the real details are in the science of big pharma or whoever else, these people cry foul. So, Tina, you can go fuck yourself. Okay?
Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Gabbard, when Russia was denying us use of chemical weapons, they accused the U.S. of supporting terrorists. This is a line that Putin used frequently during the Syrian civil war as he supported Assad. Syrian officials made similar comments. They did it repeatedly. They did it in public. They did it at the United Nations. In 2016, you gave an interview in which you said, and this is a quote, "The U.S. is providing direct and indirect support to terrorist groups in order to overthrow the Syrian government." And in 2019, on the Democratic presidential debate stage, you said of President Trump, this is a quote, "This current president is continuing to betray us. We were supposed to be going after al-Qaeda, but over years now, not only have we not gone after al-Qaeda, our president is supporting al-Qaeda." So I'm interested to hear, what was your goal in saying these things? And did you consider, before saying them, the motives of Iran and Russia, what their motives might have been before making these claims?
Senator, as someone who enlisted in the military specifically because of al-Qaeda's terrorist attack on 9/11 and committing myself and my life to doing what I could to defeat these terrorists, it was shocking and a betrayal to me and every person who was killed on 9/11, their families and my brothers and sisters in uniform. When, as a member of Congress, I learned about President Obama's dual programs that he had begun really to overthrow the regime of Syria, and being willing to, through the CIA's Timber Sycamore program that has now been made public, of working with and arming and equipping al-Qaeda in an effort to overthrow that regime, starting yet another regime change war in the Middle East. DOD train and equip program, again, begun under President Obama, is widely been known, looked at, and studied, that ultimately resulted in over $500 million being used to train who they called moderate rebels, but were actually fighters working with and aligned with al-Qaeda's affiliate on the ground in Syria, all to move forward with their regime change and not acknowledging what was obvious at the time and what has unfortunately borne true, which was that a regime change war in Syria, much like the regime change wars in Iraq, the toppling of Gaddafi and Mubarak, while these are all dictators, would likely result in the rise of Islamist extremists like al-Qaeda taking power. I shed no tears for the fall of the Assad regime, but today we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
It shouldn't
is
be.
certainly
And I
not in our
understand,
interests.
I appreciate your answer, and thank you. My concern has to do with the tendency to repeat Russian and Syrian
disinformation,
and even in some cases, I think we'll get into in the closed session, Iranian information. and to discount what comes from our intelligence community.
Oh, that's
Senator,
what you're
every
afraid of.
American
Yeah.
deserves to know that people in our own government were providing support to our sworn enemy, al-Qaeda. That should not be acceptable by anyone.
Thank
Well, that's Tulsi Gabbard throwing down. Okay, it doesn't get signal from the noise. It doesn't get any more straight down the middle than that. And again, at least this guy was willing to let her explain herself and talk. And you see a stark difference, at least between him and Tina Smith. Now I don't know if that guy was a Democrat or not, but I'd have to look into it. I'm not sure. Can you look into it real quick, Tanner, and just see whether he was Democrat or Republican? Not that it really matters, because even if he was Republican, at the end of the day, when he got back around to rebuttal what Tulsi Gabbard had stated here, which is a matter of fact, okay, a matter of historical fact, he said the quiet part out loud. I'm not really concerned about those things that you stated. What I'm concerned about is whether or not Russia's narrative, Iran's narrative, or Syria's narrative is being upplayed in the American public. Or that more importantly, what he said was the real quiet part out loud, that our intelligence community and their information isn't discredited by your comments, right? Is that what you took from it, Tanner? What he responded?
Yeah, he just seemed like he was trying to avoid it. He honestly looked like he was at a loss of words at first. He didn't even know how to come back from that.
Well, you don't want our intelligence community to be discredited by the things you're saying, Tulsi. It's like, well, first of all, she's going to be the director of national intelligence, so the buck will stop with her with intelligence. And I get that he's trying to make a point, or at least ask a question about can she be trusted with intelligence? But what she said was one of the most transparent things any politician has said about some of these wars and how our intelligence community works and how funding, like we're going to talk about with USAID, although it's not domestic, local and domestic like with USAID, it's kind of political quid pro quo and palm greasing, how the intelligence community has operated, regime changes, regime change war. She mentioned Gaddafi, Mubarak. I mean, these are things that the average American citizen needs to become more familiar with. This is what we talk about on this show all the time. And, a lot of people in the audience, I remember I used to go on Jason Whitlock all the time. A lot of people in the chat would be, oh, here he goes talking about military-industrial complex again. Take a drink every time he says military-industrial complex like it's some casual or benign issue. This is the whole deal. And if there is a scam bigger than what we're seeing with USAID and some of this other, some of these other Band-Aids we're pulling up in the earliest days of this Trump administration, it is the military-industrial complex. That's, the military-industrial complex is probably the second greatest scam in human history, only second to central banking and the Federal Reserve, right? So, but it's all fruit from the same poisonous tree. And, huge credit to Tulsi Gabbard for speaking on an issue that most people don't even want to talk about. Most people don't even want to think about, let alone speak on. And again, if I were you, I would go back and listen to this clip here from Tulsi Gabbard and dig into it, deep dive into it as much as you can. Go and look at the back and forth, the regime changes that have gone on in the Middle East and who funded what and who was on which side. And, again, I'm with Tulsi. Do I like Assad? No. Did I particularly like Gaddafi? No, but I don't know them, right? They're not leaders in my country. I shouldn't really be that worried about them or have that much of an opinion about them. If there was any disinformation or propaganda, it's this globalized sort of mentality about, politics, this sort of this hyper geopolitical mentality where we have all of this opinion about all these other world leaders, right? It's even with the royal family. The royal family makes landfall here in America. People are crying and throwing flowers. And I love what the Boston Celtics head coach said. And they asked him in a post-game press conference, I think, did he know that the royal family had come to the game? And he said, "There's only one royal family: Jesus, Joseph, and Mary." Right, and he got a lot of flack for that, right? But he also got a lot of support for saying it as well. But I agree with the sentiment. It's like, why are we so obsessed with the royal family? Why is there such a huge propaganda machine about world leaders who, in most cases, we know we don't know enough about? We can't see close enough to really have good information. We're believing the same media industry, media institutions that we now find out have been paid by a specific political source, right? It's like, why should I believe what? Why should I believe what the BBC has to say about Gaddafi? Why should I believe what the New York Times has to say about Gaddafi or Mubarak? Or why should I believe what they had to say about Saddam? Why should I believe what any of these institutions have to say about anything at this point? I mean, they've lied about so much. I'm almost better off erring on the side of safety that they were probably lying about these people. In which case, I should go back and really listen to what they had to say and try and mine out the truth for myself. But so I don't, Assad, Putin, the Iranians. See, the Iranians are different. The reason the Iranians are different is because they are very vocal about their anti-West and religious extremism. So the Iranians are a little bit different case. But Vladimir Putin's not coming out saying death to the West. And I never heard Bashar Assad come out and say death to the West or death to Christians or anything like that. Syria was a relatively stable country under Assad's regime, and that doesn't make me pro-Putin or pro-Assad. It's just a matter of fact. And it's also a matter of fact, like Tulsi so eloquently stated, when we topple these regimes, it almost seems certain that some type of Islamic extremist leadership follows in the power vacuum, and then there's a justification to continue on the hunt for terrorism. I mean, come on, it's a racket, guys. Even if it's not an intentional racket, it's a accidental racket. Either way, you end up paying for it. I'm paying for it. The fucking potholes in St. Paul, downtown St. Paul, still aren't fixed. They still got bad water in Flint, Michigan. The fires and people still devastated. The hurricane down there in the southeast corridor. Our country's in shambles. This is the beating heart of the America First movement. We spend all this money and all these energy and resources as human capital to topple these regimes just to get the same result in the end anyway. It's ridiculous. Let's roll the next clip.
And just because you're curious, Senator Kelly, Arizona.
Republican or Democrat?
Democrat.
Okay, Democrat. Yeah. Okay, makes
next
sense.
clip.
Next clip.
Okay, so we knew the U.S. government runs a $2 trillion deficit every year. We're in debt almost $40 trillion. And we also knew that anytime anyone tries to cut anything in Washington, the whole city screams bloody murder. Okay, so the question is just why? Well, now we know. The money is all going to them. It's like round tripping to them. New York Times, getting paid. Politico, getting paid. Bill Kristol, perennial warmonger, getting paid. Ukraine, getting paid. Like 11 out of 12 publications, Ukraine, getting paid.
Incredible.
Viktor Orban, who's the prime minister of Hungary, was saying that he's very popular in Hungary. His political opposition, funded by USAID. In Poland, the left-wing political opposition funded by USAID, and on and on and on it goes.
BBC, you wonder why everyone in the UK is so, yeah.
Like
I couldn't believe the BBC's getting paid.
Every left-wing organization in the world seems to be getting paid by this slush fund at USAID, which disperses about $50 billion a year. That's $1 billion a week. That's actually a lot of money. And so it makes you wonder, the left in general tries to portray itself as a movement of the people, that it's grassroots. This is the exact opposite. This is AstroTurf. This is basically money coming from the top down out of Washington to fund all of these groups, maybe not even in the United States, like all over the world. So it makes you wonder, what is the real level of local support for these left-wing policies all over the world?
Yeah. I like this guy. I mean, he's real matter of fact. He looks a little weird, but he's on point. I don't mean to make a comment about his looks. When I first saw the video, my honest reaction was, this dude looks a little weird. But yeah, it is what it is. He reminds me of the guy from The Bodyguard, the the guy who was the stalker fanatic.
No.
You ever seen The Bodyguard? You might be young to have seen The Bodyguard.
I think I know what you're talking about.
But there was a guy who was stalking the Whitney Houston. He had blonde hair. This guy has similar facial features. Does he not? Can you
It's
pull it up?
lies.
Can you
It's
pull it up over? Pull it up, dude. Let's do a comparison.
Oh shoot, let me.
Yeah, he's got that kind of look going on. But anyway, sorry, that's a side note. I made a comment about it. I got to justify it. Okay, I'm a sick puppy. My sick sense of humor. But the reality is, I like this dude. We need to get this dude close to government and power. I don't know what his role is because I just came across the clip and it didn't say who he was. It looks like he's probably in some formal place there, unless that's a green screen, which it very well could be now that I'm looking closer at it. But regardless, I like this guy. We need to get him close to the thing. He gets it. He's calling it out. And it's just what I was saying last time. I mean, BBC, the New York Times, Bill Kristol, warmongering neocon extraordinaire Bill Kristol's getting paid by USAID. And I love the term he uses. This isn't a grassroots movement. This isn't a we the people movement. This isn't a street revolution. This is AstroTurf. And whether we're saying that the people who participate in grassroots political activism are being misinformed intentionally, strategically misinformed by their government, or we're saying that there is a sort of superficial representation of how much support there is because people are actually being paid to participate. Either way, it's a scam. I mean, that's, whether I'm a BLMer and I've been paid to do the BLM thing, or I actually believe in the BLM thing because I read the New York Times. It's all AstroTurf. If the government is if a regime, a sitting regime like the illegitimate Joe Biden regime is literally in charge of a $50 billion fund, giving out $1 billion a week to manufacture the narrative, to control the narrative, we can't talk about Russian disinformation. The New York Times is effectively disinformation. The BBC is effectively disinformation. Bill Kristol's X or Twitter or whatever else is effectively now disinformation coming from within our own government, which is exactly what Tulsi Gabbard was saying, right? And it's not that complex. It's dark. It doesn't feel good. It's concerning because now as an American citizen, you're looking around and you're going, which way is up? The first thing is these legacy institutions can't be trusted, obviously. Now we find, we lance the boil, we find the pus underneath this scab is much, much more ugly than we could have ever imagined. $50 billion, again, I want to, for those who are new to the podcast, never heard me give you this visual example. Because we throw around million, billion, trillion so much, I think people lose sight of the exponential value of it.
Yeah,
right?
we can think of the number, but trying to picture that, like how much that actually is.
Yeah, it's different. And we throw the numbers around so much, and they're so interchangeable because we're only switching a letter. So it feels the same. Million, billion, trillion, it's all the same. It's not all the same. Okay. $1 million stacked up in $100 bills is as tall as a table chair. Average table chair. Pick a table chair, go to your living room, look at a table chair. You stack $1 million up in $100 bills, that's as tall as you're going to get. $1 billion would be as tall as the tallest building on earth. Used to be the Sears Tower in Chicago. Now I'm sure in China they've probably built a taller one than that. You get the picture. $1 billion stacked up in $100 bills, as tall as the tallest building on earth. In your mind, go sit a average table chair next to the tallest building on earth, and you got the difference. $1 trillion stacked up in $100 bills would reach the United States space station. Exponential math. And this is part of the reason why they decided to teach your kids transgenderism in the schools versus basic math. Because, I won't say basic math because they still teach basic math, although the standards are declining. And obviously the test scores are going down as well. So we're not doing well in math as a country. But they definitely don't teach your children about finance, because finance usually deals in exponential math. There are a lot of zeros. There are a lot of, there's a lot of exponential growth, in financial math. And there's a reason they don't teach you. So when you're an American citizen just working a regular job and you get $17.75 an hour for your job, and your paycheck comes and it's, I don't know what it is, $867.50 for the week. And then you read in the New York Times that another $241 million went to research transgenderism in animals. You don't even think about it. You just kind of go, okay, well, that's interesting. You don't think about how much money it is. $50 billion, $1 billion a week. Slush fund. It's disgusting. I mean, this type of corruption is, this type of corruption probably should bring some. I remember I said a couple weeks back that we should be slow to prosecute our political opponents just on principle.
Yeah.
This type of corruption actually would warrant some prosecution and some charges. I'm going to be honest with you. $50 billion. And again, I go back to the example of my own campaign. I remember, all these left-wing publications maybe getting money from this slush fund, making it seem like I should be brought up on criminal charges for $1,200 accidentally being spent at the strip club during my campaign. On food and beverages, by the way. And they said it over and over again. Could possibly face criminal charges from the FEC. Now, nothing ever came of that because, the evidence, the paper trail showed what actually went on. And I'm airtight confident that nothing will come of it. Not just because I'm innocent of any real wrongdoing, but because people like this, like Ilhan Omar, their FEC reports look so corrupt, it's not even passable. Like, I'm going to give my spouse's consulting firm $12,000 a month. It's like, you guys live in the same house. That's paying yourself. If I pay my wife, you shouldn't even be able to pay your wife money every month. You guys live in the same house. That's paying yourself. Or we might as well do away with the rules and say the money that you raise in politics, you can pay yourself. I mean, one way or the other. But what you can't do is let Ilhan Omar give her cuck husband, $10,000 a month of the American taxpayers' donations, and then give $1 billion a month to people like Bill Kristol, and then say that I'm wrong for $1,200 that's accidentally spent on. I mean, come on, guys. This is ridiculous. This actually pisses me off a little bit. We may need to prosecute some of you, okay? And Bill Kristol first, because your corruption was intended to manufacture consent for a war that would take young Americans' lives, potentially a nuclear war, could cause a world war. You, my friend, should be prosecuted. Let's go to the next clip. Here we got Eli Crane throwing down more corruption, more spending, government spending.
Really get held accountable. I want to start with you, Mr. Goodman. You said you have estimated over $20 billion in taxpayer money wasted on ineffective animal research. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Wow. Mr. Goodman, did you also say that it was your estimation that $241 million was spent for transgender animal testing?
Yes, and that's, I would say, is the floor, not the ceiling.
The floor, not the ceiling.
Information on federal databases is...
Pause it. What the fuck did Eli Crane just say? What did he just say? Did he say that $241 million was spent on transgender animal testing?
Yeah.
I think I just mentioned it a while, but it's crazy when you hear it. I mean, it's just crazy. I think some of this stuff has gotten so out there that we don't give it its proper, its proper acknowledgement. This shit is crazy. That's fucking nuts. $250 million? Your average American family can't put together $500 cash in a crisis. A crisis. Like my house or my apartment burnt up, all of my belongings are gone, or a hurricane ripped through the entire southeastern corridor, and my house is now a part of the ocean or the river, or in Flint, Michigan. Even I say Flint again because that's still East Palestine, Ohio.
Sometimes even a pop tire would push people over. They wouldn't even be able to get the money for a pop tire.
$250 fucking million for transgender animal studies? Are you fucking kidding me? Play the clip.
It was pretty incomplete.
So you think we're going to find out that it was much more money than that for
Yes.
transgender animal testing?
Yes.
Can you describe what exactly the American people's taxpayer dollars were spent on regarding transgender animal testing?
Yeah, in a lot of these cases, they're involve mice, rats, monkeys who are being surgically mutilated and subjected to hormone therapies to mimic female to male or male to female gender transitions, gender-affirming hormone therapies, and then looking at the biological,
no, wait a
psychological.
Wait a second. Okay, again. What fucking right? Okay. I'm a 7-year-old girl. I like sports. I want to dress like a boy. In some strange, twisted, stage of my development, I think I'm attracted to girls. And I asked for, I want to identify as a pixie, fairy, a mermaid, an omnisexual, lesbian, or transgender mermaid. Okay, cool. What scientific basis is there for them to give any transgender medicine to an animal who doesn't consent to it? On what grounds do you have to change? I mean, this tells you that the thing is sort of a scientific, Frankenstein, right? I mean, it's kind of, it's like a strange sci-fi project. Now you're going to change the gender of animals? Well, they didn't ask for that. This isn't, and people will say, oh, well, we don't ask animals to test on a lot. Yes, that's true. But to change their gender, a gender affirming care has always been based on the personal, the personal communication from the individual who's seeking it, right?
Yeah.
This is far different than cancer research or measles or some other disease. This is way different. This is a person, an individual feels a certain way about themselves or their identity, and they're asking for the medical, medical industry to help them change who they are or who they appear to be or who they feel like or whatever the case may be. But animals don't get to ask. So on what grounds are they changing the sex of animals? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like if a dog if a dog had a consciousness and he's like, yeah, I'm for sure a dude, and you took it and then just said, okay, we're going to make you a female now. You didn't get any consent.
You didn't get any consent whatsoever. What kind of fucking scam is that to do? What kind of cruelty is that to animals? That's cruel. Now, and you can make the argument that the animal experimentation for medicine in a bunch of industries is cruel. You could almost go down to, hey, how we farm, industrial farming is cruel. And I can hear all of that, okay? I'm fine with those conversations. No problem. If you all want to go back and start hunting your own food, I like that. I'm a fan of that. Let's see how people fare hunting their own food. Maybe a couple times a week, at least. Maybe to add some humility back to the culture, right? To our society. If you got to at least hunt for your own food sometimes. So I'm fine with all of the discussions around animal cruelty. I'm not trying to pigeonhole the transgender stuff, but come on, guys, it's a little out there. I mean, we can't compare industrial farming and thousands of chickens to taking a male chicken out of the chicken coop and saying, "Hey, I'm going to clip your nuts. I'm going to turn you into a female chicken." That's different. At least I think it's different. But I guess this is the whole argument we're having in the country about what our priorities should be and what morals and ethics and values we should adhere to. This shit is strange. It's getting out there. $250 million transgender animal experiments. This shit is crazy. And it's a lot of fucking money. 250. Imagine what people could. Again, I don't think people really get $250 million. You know how much could be done with $250 million? $250 million.
It's so fucking much.
I mean, think of these little container houses they got now, right? Where they're taking those shipping containers and turn them into little micro homes. This is when people say that the shit we spend money on, we could end homelessness. This is a great example. Not to mention the $1 trillion went to Ukraine, or the $6 trillion that went to Afghanistan, or the $2 trillion the Department of Defense just up and lost. I mean, that's $9 trillion right there. The Fed has $9 trillion of completely financialized collateral debt on its balance sheet. That's $20 trillion right there. I mean, now we're talking reparations numbers. You understand what I'm saying? $250 million, we could build you a little shipment container home that probably do a little barn dominium, okay? I saw a video of a barn dominium the other day online, and I thought to myself, shit, that's so cheap, I might want one. It looked pretty cool. The shit was insulated. It had television, electricity. It was, it looked like a reasonable place to live, to be honest. And it was real cheap, like $40,000 to make it. We could end homelessness, which tells you that homelessness is even a racket to some extent, right?
I call it a golden goose situation.
Yes,
Just
go
keeps
ahead.
giving you the golden eggs. They don't actually want to fix it.
There you go. Again, it's turtles all the way down. When we hear people talk about $241 million going to transgender animal experiments, you start to realize what the racket is. The racket is, if we tell you there's a problem, we get you to believe there's a problem through USAID, state-sponsored media is what it really is. Then we can justify stealing your tax money and telling you you should like it. You should feel good about it because it's going to help, the animals. The animals are getting their gender-affirming care. What the fuck? What animal gives two shits about it? It's just ridiculous. Keep playing the clip. It gets worse. It's going to get worse here.
And physiological effects of the gender transitions, looking at the effects of taking vaccines after you've transitioned these animals from male to female or female to male, looking at the size of their genitals changing after you've put them on estrogen or testosterone therapies to transition them. And in the case that the example the chairwoman gave, there was a $1.1 million grant to give female lab rats testosterone to mimic transgender male humans and then overdose them with this party drug to see if animals who were taking female animals taking testosterone were more likely to overdose on this sex party drug than animals who were not taking testosterone.
Okay, so
Mr.
it's not enough. Pause it. It's not enough to pump them full of chemicals and change their sex without consent. Now we're testing sex drugs on them too, right? Now you're getting them high. Not only, this is one of the most cruel things I think I've ever heard. It's one thing, and again, it's one thing, like let's do a hierarchy of priority, okay? It's one thing. Take industrial farming, because I use that one. A lot of people have problems with the sort of conditions of farming, right?
Yeah.
Industrial farming. Okay. It's one thing to say we are going to push the boundary, push the ethical and moral limit of what we consider to be humane or decent in order to feed people, okay? Or else people are going to go hungry. That's one thing. This has no tangible and urgent or necessary value to it. That's more what I guess I was trying to say, to put what I said before into, to distill it down. If we got to kill, if chickens have to be industrial farmed in order to make sure that people don't go hungry and starve, that a mother can feed her child, even if it's just chicken nuggets, that makes sense to me. It's not ideal. I mean, and maybe there should be a conversation about if it can be improved, that's all good. But the hierarchy priority says we don't want people to starve. And that's why we're doing it. Why are we testing sex drugs on animals? What tangible value does that give us? That, it's just this shit is sick. And the scary part is the American people first of all, the American people elected these individuals before. A lot of them are still elected. We elected Joe Biden. Sorry, quote unquote, elected. But the consensus was there that Joe Biden won. Did they try to push it on us? A lot of people agreed. We didn't elect him this time, obviously. But we've been electing these people. This ain't new. And what's even more scary is 70 million people still voted for Kamala Harris. This is the agenda that she supports. And to bring it more local. Amy Klobuchar, Tina Smith, when you hear Tina Smith talk about abortion and people need access to Prozac, what she's talking about is the LGBTQ community and gender-affirming care being within the scope of what they consider mental health treatment, mental health, medicine. It's all part of the same scam. Shout out to Eli Crane. I love Eli Crane. He's a good dude doing good work. We hope to get him on the podcast here in the very near future. But keep rolling this clip. I think we're going to hear something about Dr. Fauci here in a moment.
These taxpayer-funded animal studies shared with the public, or is there a significant oversight of this research?
You essentially needed a degree in information technology to navigate the federal spending databases to find any of this stuff.
So what you found is we're not being very transparent with what we're spending these funds on?
Of course not at all, and it's by design.
Yeah,
Did you say that Dr. Fauci, in your estimation, had funded close to 95% of these animal research projects?
Yeah, in our analysis, Dr. Fauci funded about 95% of the transgender animal experiments.
Okay, I found in some research that the EPA under President Trump is planning to reduce the agency's animal testing by 30% by 2025 and completely by 2035. Mr. Goodman, can you explain why that's a win for the American taxpayer?
Absolutely. Animal testing is incredibly time-intensive, inaccurate, and expensive, and it's not very good at predicting the human health effects or environmental effects of chemicals and pesticides. And right now, what we are doing to test human effects is poisoning lab animals, forcing them to breathe wildfire smoke simulated in a laboratory by burning different types of foliage and pumping it into animals' cages, making them obese to simulate what it would be like for obese people to be exposed to wildfire smoke, shooting off handguns and rifles and forcing animals to breathe the emissions and gun control experiments, and the list goes on. And that's what's happening currently at the EPA after the Biden administration overturned the Trump plan to phase out animal testing.
Mr. Goodman, one more question. You've also been outspoken about the COVID-19 outbreak stemming from Dr. Fauci's U.S.-funded research at China's Wuhan lab. What are the public health risks if we continue some of these outrageous animal studies?
We're flirting with disaster if we continue to fund dangerous virus research, both abroad, like in Colorado, where Fauci greenlit this bat lab. They're trying to import hundreds of bats from Asia to build a new lab in Colorado to do virus experiments with Ebola, Nipah, Lassa, deadly viruses for which there's no cure. It's just a matter of time before we have another pandemic on our hands if we let mad scientists run amok with our money.
Amen.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gain of function research.
5 minutes
yeah, gain of function research. I mean, that clip is the gift that keeps on giving, and that shit just got better and better and better. Damn. And this guy doesn't seem like he's a far right wing guy. I mean, and I can only gauge it. I don't know who he is exactly, and I can only gauge it by the sound. The energy, his energy. His energy seems like he's probably somewhat of an animal activist, animal advocate, right? Mm-hmm. He's talking like he's really speaking on behalf of the animals, saying, hey, not only is this transgender animal experiment stuff a fucking scam, but animal experimentation in general is really expensive, ineffective, and it doesn't give us good information when it comes to the human effects, especially when it comes to certain chemicals like pesticides. I mean, this is what we were saying. We say make America great again. All this corruption has become the norm in our country, in our society, in our culture that we, just accept. We've come to accept. We got people now that are pushing back. How can you be against that? I mean, you got to be a complete fucking ostrich, fucking shill to be opposed to what's going on here right now in this country. This is fantastic. We get to call into question everything that we've had, skepticism about up until this point. And to make matters even worse, we find out that Dr. Fauci possibly funded 95% of the transgender animal experiment studies. What? Dr. Fauci, you're a sick fuck. You know that? I mean, you maybe should prosecute Dr. Fauci. Okay. Some of you people need to be prosecuted. I'm just going to say again, I'm more for the truth commissions, and I don't like the political prosecutions because I know that the pendulum is going to swing and we'll be going back and forth, tit for tat. And before you know it, the integrity and fabric of our legal system and justice system will be so undermined, so broken, we will have a banana republic, which we're already on the verge of now. So I'm very against prosecuting our political opponents just on principle. But Dr. Fauci, you're a sick little fuck. We might have to I might have to even make a special exception for Dr. Fauci. This is disgusting. If not enough of the transgender animal experiments, just to continue on with gain-of-function research like we don't all know what the dangers are, it's just a slap in the face of the American people. They're basically telling you, our scientific overlords are basically saying, you all are so unaware of what's going on in the scientific echelon of our society. We're going to put dangerous viruses right in your backyard, and you just need to trust that we know what we're doing. Even though we've shown time and time again, we have a tendency to fuck shit up, like a train derailing in East Palestine and there being hazardous toxic chemicals all over the fucking town. And it's just one example. When we go through line by line of these scientific experiments going wrong and people being exposed to chemicals and disease that they never should have been exposed to, and to what end? On the off chance that the bubonic plague makes a comeback. Okay, so and this is where like a little faith, right? So the bubonic plague could make a comeback. I'm not saying that's impossible. But what would be worse? What would make us feel worse as a species? And you can answer this, Tanner. Looking back on it, let's say a bubonic plague comes back. Most likely people are going to survive it. It's going to mutate, and the virus is going to do what most viruses do. They become weaker and weaker in most cases, and some population will survive it. Okay, so that population now in the year 2040 is looking back at a 10-year pandemic that wiped out, let's say, 50% of the world's population. What would they feel worse about? Would they feel worse about a naturally occurring disease and epidemic bubbling up and wiping out a bunch of people, or that man, out of fear, caused a pandemic that wiped out 50% of the people? One, we would be responsible. We would be culpable. The other, we would not. But these scientific relativists, they try and say, well, if we knew that there was a chance that this could happen and we didn't do anything about it, then we're responsible as well. And that is anti-nature. That is a sin against nature. Remember a couple podcasts back, I was talking about sin according to nature and sin contrary to nature. There's a great quote, is wars, I think it was Captain America that said this in the Marvel movie, right?
I don't watch any Marvel, but
anyway,
continue.
there's some. First of all, the Marvel movies have been done incredibly well, in my opinion. There's woke and shit all in them, but overall, where we've come with cinema is a modern Marvel itself. But there was a quote, is about Iron Man talking to Captain America and saying, "Hey, the war, the prospect of war. There's a war coming," and Captain America says, every time in history somebody tries to stop a war before it starts, it always ends bad. And there's a lot of truth to that. And you can map that onto what's going on in Ukraine now. We're so obsessed with what Russia may or may not do, what they're capable of, what their motive and intentions are. We are willing to instigate a war and bring about the war we were trying to avoid on ourselves anyway. It's the same thing with this epidemiology and disease research. No, we're so afraid of death. And I get it. I got anxiety. I don't want to fucking, die, on a plane. It's why I don't fly, right? And oh, by the way, there seems to be a bunch of malfunctions going on with planes these days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, I'd rather get shot in the fucking head than spend the last 5 minutes or 30 seconds of my life caught in a metal tube, 10,000 feet in the air, free falling, and having to listen to everybody else's terrors in that final moment. All their unrepented sins and regrets, and that just doesn't seem like an okay way for me to die. Personally, that's my personal choice. Maybe for some other people, cool. And that's your choice. Some people feel like it'd be worthwhile to die climbing Mount Everest. I got a boy who climbed Mount Everest. We're going to have him back on the podcast, Ryan Rivard, and congratulations to him. It's not my thing. I don't find any value in, a free solo on the side of a skyscraper with no harness and potentially falling off and falling to my doom. That doesn't seem worthwhile to me. Me, personally. That's all. It also doesn't seem worthwhile to say, well, I'm in such a rush to get from here to Chicago that I need to go to the airport 2 hours before my flight takes off, and I got to sit there and go through the fucking hassle and stress of everybody else's travel anxiety. And then the TSA is fucking assholes. Like, every person that's coming through the airport's a potential terrorist. We know that's not fucking true. Another NSA, National Security Patriot Act, post 9/11 fucking scam. How crazy TSA has gotten. And then, I got to sit on the tarmac and wait for some crew to show up because they're short crew, because they're short pilots or second officers, because they made them all get vaccinated. Some of them didn't want to. And now I'm delayed to my next spot. And now I get there and they don't got a crew to come out and taxi us to the fucking, we end up being short of the fucking, what's it called? The bridge, right? Mm. And now I got to sit here for 30 minutes. Before you know it, it's been fucking 5-6 hours. I could have just gotten my fucking car and drove to Chicago from Minneapolis, right? And all the while, again, let's say I'm on the road in the winter and I spin my car into a fucking, what is it called?
The median.
A median, yeah. Right? Or, the underpass of the bridges, people crash like that. They go straight into the embankment.
Yeah.
Right? And that shit is not giving. It's ground, right? But, let's say that I spin out and die that way. Better that way than going down on a plane with 100 other people in their last final moments of terror. Mm-hmm. To me. And I say that all to say, I understand anxiety. I understand this existential angst we have about, cataclysm, catastrophe, disease, plague, famine. I get it. And I'm not saying we shouldn't work to avert any of those things. To what extent? At what cost? If bubonic plague is going to make a comeback, let it make a comeback, okay? For us to experiment and potentially cause the bubonic plague is not justifiable. It's stupid. It's arrogant. It's stupid. And it's fucking dangerous. It's really dangerous, as we saw with the pandemic. So, Dr. Fauci, you're a fucking asshole. That's my final on it. He's an asshole. And all of the scientific technocrats like him. You're more impressed with your degrees and your education and your experiments and your vision of the future than you are with basic human life and obviously some level of transparency and honesty. And on that basis alone, you're not fit to hold an office like he holds. And a lot of you fuckers aren't fit for the positions that you have because you're just not. You're not oriented the right way. Next clip. Is that the last clip?
Nope, we just got 2 more.
2 more clips. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Thank you, Senator. It is really, really a sad day in America. We are witnessing a constitutional crisis. We talked about Trump wanting to be a dictator on day one, and here we are. This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like. When you gut the Constitution and you install yourself as the sole power, that is how dictators are made. What Trump and Elon and all of their cronies are trying to do is take away the constitutional power of Congress.
You don't believe the
We get to
Constitution.
decide.
It's
We
ridiculous.
have the power of the purse. We get to decide where money is allocated, and it's the executive's power to make sure that that money gets to where it needs to get. When we talk about civil servants being let go, what we are talking about is not saving money. It's essentially saying they can get paid while they're home and their work doesn't get done on behalf of the American people. It is us, taxpayers, who are being ripped off. It is us, taxpayers, who are not getting the resources that we paid into. So I ask the American people, do you want people at home and getting a paycheck and not providing services to you? The answer is no. Do you want the executive
Pause. Stop. I can't take anymore. This is like the crudest, most stupid explanation of how government works that I think I've ever seen in my life.
I also find it a little fishy because didn't they do that to us in COVID?
That's
stay home and we'll send you checks.
That is a great point there, young Tanner. That is exactly what they did during COVID. And not only did they do it, they promoted it. They went out of their way to make sure that it stayed that way. In fact, there are so many employers, there are so many jobs that still have remote work from COVID. That's clear it was a part of the agenda. Again, the freedom of movement. Okay? Another way to limit the freedom of movement. And my point is, what Donald Trump and what Elon Musk are saying is the work that people are getting paid to do isn't actual work. I mean, it may be energy spent, it may be time spent doing something, but is it actually bringing the result, the said result? And the answer is no, obviously. For as big as the government has got, let's just look at it from 30,000 feet. As big as the government has gotten, do you think your government is effective? The answer is fucking no. I just gave 1,000 examples. I could go on for days and days. Tulsi Gabbard gave an example. RFK gave an example. The guy who testified with Eli Crane, he's given examples. The point is people are getting paid to do a job. The question is, does the job actually benefit the American people? Or even furthermore, is the work actually work? Is it actually is anything getting done? Because in some cases we see that $50 billion is just a slush fund for, political agendas. And that's who Ilhan Omar is. She is the face of a political agenda. And she could window dress it up how she wants to. She can, she speaks okay. I find it disingenuous because I can feel it. I just feel people's energy. It just, it's theatrical. It's dramatic, right? She's a drama queen, right? She's an actress. Like AOC, she comes out and she's dancing and she's making the hair out and she's shaking it. And I show up to the fucking Met Gala with a high designer couture dress that says the elites are robbing us blind. It's like you have a $100,000 couture dress on. What the fuck are you talking about? It's ridiculous. But, some people are just dumb enough to believe these people. And why I feel so bad and why I continue to do the podcast is I know they've intentionally misinformed you, miseducated you, and brainwashed you so it's much easier. You're much more susceptible to believe what these people are saying. It's bullshit. We need to cut down on the government. You should not trust your government. Your government has never shown itself to be highly effective in a lot of things. And the corruption is so widespread, the audit is necessary. Next clip. Speaking of government scams and narratives and bullshit, here's the founder of the Weather Channel on Stelter. Is that Stelter there? I think it is. And
I'm not sure.
And he's
Sorry.
talking to Brian Stelter is his name, another cuck extraordinaire, talking about climate change. This is always a classic.
Let me bring in John Coleman. He's in San Diego this morning. Thank you for being here.
It's nice to be on CNN. Hello to all your viewers. I resent you calling me a denier. That is a word meant to put me down. I'm a skeptic about climate change, and I want to make it darn clear Mr. Kennedy's not a scientist. I am. He's the CEO of the Weather Channel now. I was the founder of the Weather Channel, not the co-founder.
And I'm glad you did, because I am addicted to the Weather Channel. I watch a lot of cable news.
Now. Hold on just a minute. I'm not done. And CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and yes, it has become a big political point of the Democratic Party and part of their platform, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion about the topic right here. What I do wonder, though, is when you see...
because you wouldn't allow it to happen on CNN, but I'm happy that I got on the air and got a chance to talk to your viewers. Hello, everybody. There is no global warming.
What I do want...
That is legendary. That is a legendary clip right there. He just smashed the entire climate change narrative to pieces. And again, hey, is it climate change and is it not? I don't know. Are the oceans rising? They're still at the same levels, there at Ellis Island as they were when the European immigrants came through in the middle 1900s or the early 1900s. So there's no real evidence there. If you need a real measurement, Barack Obama bought a $20 million house in Martha's Vineyard right there on the beach, well after climate change has become a focus of the Democrats' political platform and narrative. So something definitely a little strange with climate change, to say the least, and that's partly why the great Donald Trump pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement in the first few weeks of his term. And amen. That is a good thing. And what's funny about it is what's great about what he said was there is no consensus in science. Science isn't about consensus. It's not a vote. It's facts. In fact, there are plenty of times you could point to throughout human history where the consensus in science was wrong. And the minority, or in some rare cases, the individual, the sole individual, became a martyr for their beliefs about a certain issue or particular issue, and later proven to be true. Nikola Tesla, one of them. Galileo, another, and plenty others. Dr. Pierre Corey, corticosteroids. I mean, so when these CNN guys, this is why I call them cucks, is because they live and die by consensus, and this is where the term democracy really runs afoul. And this is exactly what Ilhan Omar was trying to use as well. They're trying to use democracy as this loaded buzzword, as a cudgel to combat anybody who has their own opinion, whether or not that opinion can be supported by fact. Earlier, it was Tulsi Gabbard and RFK. They're saying things that most people haven't been willing to say, but they're supported by historical fact. And if there's a consensus that this information is dangerous or this information isn't, we don't want people to talk about, or whatever the case may be. In this case, it's climate change. We want the public to believe that there's a climate crisis. So anybody who says something against it is deviating from the consensus too much. Fine, good. That's what we want. That's who Donald Trump is. In many ways, that's who Elon Musk has been. Steve Bannon, myself, and the list goes on and on. Tulsi, RFK, Eli Crane. I'm not just naming Trump supporters. But the idea that a consensus makes something a fact is a heresy, right? I mean, that's the main point is consensus is only truth when it's true, right? I mean, and this is why we are a constitutional republic and we're not a democracy. We have democratic process, but we're actually a republic. And the reason why is because democracies have are susceptible to a mob rule, to people gathering together in the town square and agreeing casually, tacitly, superficially, kind of on the surface, just agreeing by way of momentum. Hey, this is what's right. Kind of in that manic sort of, mob-like style. And before you know it, you got 100, 200, 300, but look at Jonestown.
Yeah.
It's a great example of what happens, when a democratic process runs afoul and what they call mob rule, right? Look at Wild Wild Country, Rajneesh. There's another great Netflix documentary about a guru who became a sex cult leader, and there was some real fishy, crazy shit that went down there.
There's something that we all know that it was based on consensus, Nazi Germany.
Nazi Germany is another good one, another good example. And then the Nazi Germany is unique because it, like AJ said, it becomes hard to decipher when you're, a third party, how many people really are consenting.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good point. That's a really
It's
good
like
point.
even now, it's Donald Trump. All of the polls would suggest that Kamala Harris was a shoo-in to win, or a lot of polls would suggest that. But part of that is because people don't want to publicly say that they were going to vote for Donald Trump. So there's a lot of problems with this whole, and the reason I say that is because this podcast tries to deal with the intellectual, and part of the intellectual, a huge part of it is vernacular, lexicon, our vocabulary, our word choice, how we tell the story of our society. And one of the huge words that's come up in the last, 2-3 years, consensus, democracy. Like these are gospel. Democracy is not a gospel word. Jesus Christ wasn't a democracy. His reign, his story, his narrative wasn't one of democratic consensus. He's anti-democratic. It's right. I mean, the people cried for you. They called for, give us Barabbas. They called for him to be crucified. The Romans, who actually had a republic at the time, they carried it out. And why did they carry it out? Because they left it to the people, or that was their workaround. That's their excuse anyway. Pontius Pilate says, well, let his people decide. Right? That's the story of Christ. Pontius Pilate, Christ is brought to Pontius Pilate, and Pontius Pilate makes the decision to let his own people decide his fate. When in actuality, he knew better. But process. Let's take a vote. And that was part of the Roman process. It's part of the Roman process that still lives on today in America. And I'm not saying we should do away with taking votes, but what I'm saying is there are cases where the democratic process, a vote doesn't yield something that's right or righteous, doesn't yield something that's true. At least doesn't yield something that's true. Now, if we take a vote and we get it wrong as a society, we deal with the outcome, okay. But a consensus about something scientific, that's even further, that's even worse. Because now we're basically saying, hey, all of these people think a certain way, and we're going to live by that, by that way of thought without any real evidence. So it's just, we got to start to reorient the way we think about our culture, our society, consensus, democracy. It's like, yeah. All things equal, right? In the best case scenario, democracy, everybody gets an equal vote. Everybody's equal. Everybody's not equal. Everybody's vote isn't equal. I mean, everybody's vote is equal, but it's really not equal, right? Because your vote, in the value of your vote, if you want to get technical, really comes down to how well versed you are in the thing that you're voting on.
Mm-hmm.
Just by that standard, your vote's not equal, right? If you and I are voting on one thing and I know more about it than you do, is our vote equal? It may have the same equal value on paper, but there's nothing really equal about it, right? It's like being on a team. If I'm on a team and I take, let's NBA is a great example. I think we got a clip here of the NBA, Luka Doncic related clip here at the end of the podcast, but look at how they do load management. Pause. In the NBA. Good example. If I'm LeBron James and I play 38 minutes a game, I'm playing 39 minutes a game. And, I've been playing 38 minutes a game for 20 seasons. It's not the same as the guy who just was drafted he's on his third year and he doesn't play at all. It's not equal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another reason why athletes have such an important perspective in trying to balance out the ideal society versus the reality. Because sports is another domain where you can't play fictitious as everybody's equal. We're not all equal. And in the Bible, it doesn't say we're all equal. It says we were all born equal. The idea of sin itself starts to distinguish people from being equal and no longer equal. So even from a biblical, when the Democrats try and use that, doesn't God say love everybody? Love thy neighbor, love thy enemy, pray for your enemy, pray for your neighbor. Yes, but that is a grave misrepresentation, or let's say a fast and loose way to describe how judgment is done, biblically speaking. So we are all created equal. You can make the argument we're born equal, although born equal is even a stretch because we carry the sins of our fathers and our forefathers.
Oh yeah, I was born to be 5'8", and it's pretty unfair that you're so much taller than me, Royce.
Hey,
it's just what it is.
But hey, it balances out. Taller people usually live live shorter lives.
Did not know that.
Yeah, taller people live shorter lives. Yeah, so again, not equal. How that inequality plays out, time will tell. But this whole democracy scam, I'm just sick of it. It's the consent, especially in the science world. There ain't no consensus about climate change. Number one, there's not a consensus about climate change. Number two, even if there is a consensus, we need to be temperature checking and making sure that it's correct.
Yeah.
Because consensus does not mean true. Last clip here, we're headed out. Want to leave with this Luka Doncic fan in Dallas who is beside himself at the trade. And I want to talk about it just a little bit. Go ahead.
I've been a master my whole entire life since I've been a baby. This is the worst moment in the history of my life. This is ridiculous. This is crazy, man. We went to the NBA Finals. Why are we trading the best player, the franchise player? How are we trading the franchise player? We went to the NBA Finals. He's supposed to have a statue. He's supposed to have a statue. Dirk got a statue right there. It's supposed to be Luka right there. Why we don't got a statue for Luka? This new management is putting profit over fans. Profit over fans. Feel me? They're not worried about the fans. They don't care. Now we've invested 7 years of it believing in Luka, believing in building a team around Luka. They don't care about that. They just want to make their gambling money, make a couple $100 million, and leave us stuck out here. Now we're back to square one. We're back to square zero. You feel me? It's ridiculous. Luka filled that stadium. Who gonna fill it now? Who gonna fill that stadium now?
I love this guy. He's telling the truth. The funny thing is it's wild. It's wild that we have a culture where sports is so important, and super fans is a real thing. Now, part of me has to appreciate that and be thankful for that, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be sitting here, right? If it wasn't for how much people love the game of basketball and how many diehard Iowa State Cyclone fans there are, or how much people love the NBA. Then I wouldn't have a fast track to run for United States Senate with some name, notoriety, and recognition. Aside from all of the great things that team sports has given me character-wise and my perspective on things. So super fans, but all and still super fans are still funny to me. It's like there's real shit going down in the world, and his most emotional opinion is about Luka Doncic. But actually, in all seriousness, he's speaking to something much deeper. He feels cheated. He feels cheated by a small group of powerful individuals that have the reins on something that he loves dearly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you just blow my mind that you can make these philosophical connections. You're so right, dude.
This one feels like a stretch. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, he's
This
got
one
the
feels
whole
like I'm
crowd
reaching.
behind him, bro, with all the signs.
But there's something to it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, these people feel. Look, you don't take it with as much going on in our society on a daily basis for people who are disaffected, having problems financially, emotionally, spiritually, so on and so physically. You don't take time out of your day to come and rally at the arena to speak about your, disaffectedness or your anger. Let's just put it plain. Your anger, if it's not real, you just don't take the time to do it.
Yeah.
The anger is real for these people. They feel cheated, and rightfully so. And you know why they feel cheated? Because we've created a culture where sports is so important. Fandom has become religious in some sense.
Mhm.
So, although I think we would do well to slowly walk ourselves back off of the cliff of having sports be the highest and most important thing in your average person's life, I understand this frustration. I really do, because some of these organizations make these decisions completely independently of what people would think. And in that way, you'll find an NBA who claims to be so pro-democratic making these very tyrannical decisions, right? Now, that's a philosophical bridge right there. That's right. The Adam Silvers and the Dallas, and I'm not saying that owner specifically because I don't know the details of this trade. I saw some rumors, but I'm not going to speculate because it's not really that important to me. But these NBA owners and front offices, they make these decisions with a lot of individual autonomy, right? But then politically, they go to Judge Donald Trump and they go, well, this isn't democratic. Like, nothing about your life and the decisions you make professionally is democratic, or very few. Or it's based on some signal from the market that you perceive that doesn't have great evidence either. It's like, oh, well, a lot of people on Twitter like Luka Doncic, or, you know what I mean? So we can't trade him. Well, speaking about it from a basketball standpoint, I understand this guy's frustration, but from a basketball standpoint, I'll say this. A lot of people messaged me, asked me about the trade, so why I'm speaking on it, and I said we'd incorporate sports. Didn't get to the music this time. I think we'll do a whole music reaction show next week because I really want to do some music clips because I'm a real music enthusiast. You guys come to know that as we start to incorporate some. But on a basketball basis, the trade is a bad trade for the Lakers. I got to be – and look, the Lakers could find a way to make it work and prove me wrong, but I still think long-term, whatever long-term means for the Lakers who are trying to find a way to, carve a path forward in a post-LeBron James, franchise, because LeBron James's days are numbered, obviously, although I think he could reasonably play until he's 45 years old, to be quite honest, just physically and the way that the game is played and the way that the refs call the game and the way that the schedule and the expectation are standard for how much people have to play. I think LeBron James could reasonably play another 5 seasons, to be honest. Let's cut him down to 60 games, 50 games. Let's make sure that we're managing his minutes. He could play. Now, could he be the LeBron James that everybody remembers? Probably not. But again, I mean, even this season, you've seen some really impressive athletic plays from LeBron James. I'm talking coming through the lane and dunking body to body on some 7-footers. So LeBron James is a phenom. But I get the Lakers are trying to, figure out, okay, we got to win now. And Luka Doncic, maybe he's the star that we build around going forward if LeBron James decides to retire, because LeBron James really does have the Lakers in the palm of his hand, right? He holds their future in the palm of his hands because at any moment he could decide to retire and now they have to rebuild, right? And whether you like him or not, him retiring would take something away from that team, not only from his own his own physical and his own individual production, but what he brings to the team in terms of knowledge and understanding of the game. Like I said last week, LeBron James is a very smart basketball player, so he brings a lot to a team anyway. Here's the thing with Luka Doncic. Very good player, very exciting to watch. Another guy who sees things before they happen. Very underrated passer. doesn't play any fucking defense. I mean, he doesn't guard anybody. Now, in the modern NBA where people is like, how many points can we score? How many threes can we shoot? Maybe teams can get away with being off-focused, offensive-minded. And maybe the way that the game is reffed and the way that the game is played across the league will reward players who are so good offensively. And Luka Doncic is a very good offensive player. The question is, when you run into a team who's counterintuitive and counterculture enough to really give a fuck about playing defense. See, when you run into a team late in the NBA playoffs who has a few guys or a few people in management or a few people on the coaching staff who really give a fuck about defense, they pose a pretty big fucking problem for everybody else. And the way that we coach our kids, our young kids, whether it's at the junior high level, like my son is, 7th, 8th graders, or it's all the way up at the varsity or any of the college kids that I have the chance to work with, I tell them all the exact same thing. If your foundation to being a basketball player isn't the toughness and discipline to be a great defender, to be an effective defender, to be a defender that impacts the game and that your teammates can rely on, I can't reasonably tell you how your career will fare. I can't reasonably tell you how things are going to go for you. Because ultimately defense does win championships. Defense is the anchor of team sports, of basketball, but really all contact team sports. If you can't defend, if you can't stop teams from scoring, everything else is really unpredictable. It's a crapshoot. Are we going to shoot well tonight? I don't know. The best shooters in history only shot a little under 50%. Whether Steph Curry, Ray Allen, Klay Thompson, you know, pick one. The best shooters in history only shot just under 50%. That's a coin toss. I don't like coin toss odds. And defensive intensity and defensive determination and defensive grit is and it's a metaphor for what America needs. Right now, America needs to become a team that is defensive minded, right? That's gritty, that's tough. That we're not so impressed with the glamour of some scientific innovation, you know, some Nobel Peace Prizes. Nah, we got to get down in the trenches. We got to get down in the trenches. It's this possession right here we need to stop. We need a good outcome with this thing right here. Not kicking the can down the road in hopes that some AI invention in the future will be this huge mantelpiece for some small group of individuals can hang their hat and say, look what we did. You know, it's like your average American family doesn't have $500 cash in a crisis. We got to defend against that circumstance. We got to defend against another pandemic. And I'm tying it into sports for a reason. Sports is a great microcosm for a lot of this shit. You know, we got to be defensive-minded team. Defensive-minded teams like the Eagles are gritty. And look, the Chiefs are another good example. They're popular, had a lot of success. Everybody loves them. You know, big money over there. Kelsey, he's getting every endorsement he could possibly get his hands on. Taylor Swift, big money, $100 million tours. You know, Pat Mahomes, highest paid NFL player in history. Big money. You know, a lot of spotlight. Ran into a team that doesn't give a fuck. Ran into a team that didn't care about the popularity or the spotlight or the bullshit. They just nose to nose. Like, I knew the game was going to be a problem when Patrick Mahomes was in the pocket and the kid, I forget his first name off the top of my head, but he's a DN and his last name is Sweat. And he's about 6'6", 6'5", 6'6", built like a tight end. So he's more athletic. He's lightning fast. But I knew they were going to have a problem when he literally took both hands and shoved an offensive lineman into Patrick Mahomes, which affected the throw. I think he ended up throwing an interception on the play. But the point was, you know, as far as defensive ends go, I used to play football too. And as far as defensive ends go, it's more of a finesse position, more of a speed position, more of a position where I'm a little bit quicker than this offensive lineman. So I'm going to, you know, beat him in a foot fight, in a foot race, right? For a defensive end to just bulldoze you, that means these motherfuckers came to they wanted blood. They didn't care about the odds. right? They didn't give a fuck about the odds. They didn't give a fuck what Vegas says. We don't care what the analysts say there in the studio on on NFL Sun. We don't give a fuck. We're coming, and every possession is going to be a fucking dogfight. And that's defensive-minded team. So for everybody out there who has a question about the Luka Doncic trade, hey, maybe Luka Doncic wakes up tomorrow morning and says, I got to start to prioritize being at least a reasonable defender. If he does that, maybe the trade works out fine. If he guards the way he's been guarded in Dallas, I guarantee the Los Angeles Lakers will not be successful. I can almost guarantee it. So, a testament to that the NBA is a game that's going more towards the superficial and who can shoot the most threes or score the most points and away from the sort of toughness, the toughness and grit and discipline of being a great defensive team. So, that's it for me today. It's been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy. I hope you enjoyed the show. We appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. The prescription as we sign off is become a tough, gritty, disciplined defender. Become that guy who nobody wants to play against, right? Become that defensive player out there nobody wants to play against. Everybody can shoot threes. But be that guy. As an American citizen, your dharma, your American dharma, your civic duty is become a tough-nosed, gritty citizen that nobody wants to really face off against, right? That's how you protect a nation from within. Not from the fucking WHO. Fuck the WHO. Each American citizen has to become that tough-nosed defender, right? Gritty. I'm slapping the floor, and we're going again. And it's just every time it's like a war of attrition. That's why I like defense, because you really start to see how you can wear a team down, emotionally, psychologically. If you've ever seen a great defender guard a great offensive player and they really had success, you can just see the confidence start to leave that offensive player's face, and you can start to see the panic set in, like, oh, shit, this motherfucker will not quit. He's not going to give up. The only thing I can hope for is that this final horn goes off and this shit is finally over, right? I want out. That's what we got to become here in America as American citizens. So, again, I appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. We got the great Steve Bannon on Friday's Family and Friends guest episode. We hope you enjoyed this reaction episode today. Real America's Voice this Saturday morning will be hosted by Professor Penn. In my absence, I'm traveling this weekend, so I will not be able to do Real America's Voice live as I usually do, which is great. I love having Professor Penn sit in and give you his point of view as well. And then we have Chris Martin sit on Monday. So big week ahead for Free People Radio and the podcast. If you get a chance, go to tireget.com if you need tires. Enter promo code FPR for 3% off your final purchase. And freepeopleradio.com, as always, if you would like to buy merchandise from or related to the podcast. It's a good way to support the movement. That's it for me. The fight continues. God bless America. Godspeed. The people are coming. Everything's up on the bar. We're all in. We get to decide. Do you want to live on your knees, or do you want to die on your feet fighting? That's the decision you get to make now.